Hello, everybody. Welcome back. My name is Caleb Johnston, and today we are going to be looking at something that I know it's controversial, so I'm just going to ask for your guys' forgiveness ahead of time. I really do intend to be charitable. Yeah, as you can see, I've got my notes up here. My first disclaimer was I really do intend to be charitable with this one. It's one of the less controversial ideas I was going to make a video on, and I didn't have that many ideas. I'm kind of just getting things started, so I was like, hey, I'll pick the least upsetting out of all of these, and I'll just pick it apart real quick. So anyway, with that being said, forgive me if I look down at my notes occasionally. Now you guys can see what I'm referencing to see if I'm going off script or anything like that. But with that being said, yeah, once again, those two disclaimers, as you can see, my knowledge and experience is quite lacking in these areas at the moment. I am currently doing a lot of study, and the area of evolution is one that I have studied very briefly. Like, I mean, I have studied bits and pieces of it, but I found the evidence to be satisfactory. So I didn't really feel any need to go really that deeply into it. I probably will in the future, though, once I get through a lot of my other reading and debates and sources and et cetera, et cetera. So with that being said, uh, let's get straight into it. So there will be links in the description, as you can see here, for a lot of the information or presumptions that I'm making here. You guys can feel free to go into it if you like, or assume it or disregard it, but you guys can at least go and see what I'm talking about for like a basic defense of the evidence that we do have and how it was found and discovered and the methods, etc., which goes into my argument pretty well. So with that being said, what is the first point? So I'm going to make a bit of a presumption here that invalidating knowledge typically invalidates the methods or ideologies or processes used to find said knowledge. There are exceptions to this. For instance, if the methods, ideologies, or processes are badly used, or if they aren't good in the first place. But the point is, in this case, that invalidating knowledge, when the methods and ideologies and processes used to find that knowledge are being used correctly, invalidating that knowledge reverse invalidates the methods, ideologies, and processes. This is not a hard and fast rule. It's just something that I think is kind of typical. For instance, if somebody says that let's say, I'm trying to think of a good example here, that they say that the desk is red. So let's have an object, the desk is red. I don't know why it's painted red, but it's red. And you have four other people that say, oh, but that desk is actually black. Well, then you are invalidating the knowledge that that person has claimed by essentially saying that the method they use, their eyes, are not properly perceiving the color. You have more people saying the opposite, and it gets complicated. That was a bad example, but I made that up on the fly. As you can see, it's not in the notes. I made it up. So it's just an example to talk about that this can be, depending on the situation, this unfortunately does happen, where if you say this knowledge is dumb, you're kind of implying, it's almost like if you say, when somebody makes a point about something, you say, that's stupid. Well, you're kind of implying the person who said it is stupid. Like, hang on bear with me. You'll hear my point in a second. Anyway, with that being said, what is the second point? Well, evolution generally uses the same methods, ideologies, and processes that are employed to discover most other scientific knowledge. Of course, the scientific method and all of the methods that have sprouted out from that. But the truth is, the methods that were used to discover evolution are not necessarily, they're not in any way, shape, or form like vibrantly different than the ones that were used to discover, for instance, the theory of atoms and the gravity and the forces of nature and others things that pretty much everybody just accepts verbatim without really any consequence or any second thoughts like, wait a second, or even the size of the universe or black holes, all of these things, basic scientific knowledge that we have, photosynthesis, plants, biology, all these things are different fields, but similar methods. And so the third point here is that so a fundamentalist who tends to reject evolution due to the literal interpretation of Genesis. That was came out wrong the way of saying it, but you get my point. So fundamentalists tend to reject it due to the literal interpretation of Genesis. So they would say, well, this is invalid because of the interpretation of Genesis. It crosses it out. Usually more literal. There are those who do not take as much of a literal interpretation, which I totally respect. But my point is the ones who do, you've got that overlap right there. And that's quite difficult because in my fourth point, as you can see, that by rejecting evolution and its methods, ideologies, and processes, it follows that this throws a lot of doubt on any science discovered using those methods. And unfortunately, as we talked about earlier, that includes, I mean, pretty much the entire canon of Western science. because all of those methods are recycled and used to verify each theory and each practice. The same ones are used for each thing. Scientific method, theories, positing a thesis, positing, oh goodness, different points and then validating them by experiments, and etc. I mean, it's pretty much the same process. It's just done differently with different evidence for different projects and for different proofs. So that probably sounded a bit incoherent when I speak on the fly. I forget a lot of things, but you get my point. So anyway, with that being said, conclusion is that to be logical and reasonable, fundamentalists should also be equally skeptical about science overall as they are about evolution. Now, this is important because, for instance, history, which is a huge part of evolution, is also a part of science in a sense. I mean, not the same way. You can't validate it in the same way that you can validate, you can't verify it with experiments and conclusions, and you can't posit the same things you can because it's in the past. But it is still something that we use science to evaluate what we can find, and if you're going to be skeptical about, for instance, the evolution and the methods that were used to find evolution, you're going to have to equally be skeptical about everything else that uses those same things. Now, as I said, this is not a huge knockout point. It's like not, oh wow, all science, you guys must reject it for fundamentalists, but it's just an observation for consideration and contemplation for those who accept, most other science, but reject evolution just because of the literal interpretation of Genesis. You really do have to do some backtracking and say, well, that does invalidate the methods by logic, and then that does also throw shade on the rest of science that uses those methods. So, with that being said, hopefully that sounded somewhat cohesive. As I said, I am my schedule's a bit all over the place right now, so I usually put these videos together kind of randomly. So when I'm speaking about them, as you can see, I've got terrible hand motions and I'm sitting here reading through all of this random information, but hopefully you at least got some value from that, and you can look through the articles, read on some of the information if you're doubting some of what I said. I plan on building on this in the future, definitely. It's a point that I think needs to really be taken into consideration with a lot more cited evidence than just what I was giving here and a few links, but I thought it would be good to get this out in the field, get it so people can start thinking about it. And with that being said, I will see you all in the next video.